Can I please have Scooter Wooldridge to the stage? He is Larry Brown's husband and will be sharing their story.
So I want to start out by saying I'm known as the more stoic one between Larry and me. He was the emotional softie, but we'll see if that holds true today. I want to thank Scott and Charger for inviting me and for sharing your own stories. I do truly appreciate the opportunity and this occasion to remember those who have offered their service to the nation and its public. I always enjoy talking about my late husband, and it's an honor to do so in this context. Even though it's impossible to fully describe his or anyone's life in just a few minutes. In brief summary, he was a lover of dogs, music, cooking, beer, travel, including over a dozen gay cruises. And I think part of that was because it harkened back to his Navy career when he would correct me when I would say right or left of the ship instead of starboard or port, or front or back instead of aft. But today I wanted to just really focus, because of that, I want to really focus just on his Navy career and how it impacted his life for the rest of his time on Earth. He was a Navy vet, and Lawrence Edgar Brown and I spent 31 years together, married for 15 of those years as soon as it became legal in the district. We met in 1993 when I was in college at Mary Washington College, which is in Fredericksburg, just should be an hour south of here. Sometimes it's 2 hours, 2.5 hours. In 93, Larry had just left the U.S. Navy after having served in Operation Desert Storm as a petty officer on the cruiser USS Wharton in the capacity of a fire controlman. In addition to the Middle East, he also sailed much of the Pacific, including Hawaii, the Philippines, Singapore, Alaska, as well as the Indian Ocean. But Fredericksburg was his home, and that's where he ended up. As a rising senior, all my college friends thought that this handsome, mature guy that I was dating, slightly older than us and who was just out of the Navy, was so cool and handsome, and of course they were right. Larry's father, George, was also in the Navy, and it turns out he was on another ship, also called the USS Wharton, which Larry always got a kick out of that coincidence. Larry joined for adventure and challenge, both of which he got. He was in the Navy for 6 years, and those years helped form who he became and influenced the rest of his life. Larry often reflected on that experience, sharing stories both fun and dutiful. He was a presenter on the ship's radio newscast, sometimes irreverently reporting on gossip or some situation he probably shouldn't, broadcasting it to the whole ship. He was also the unofficial loan shark on the ship, winning a lot of friends and some enemies on board, but would help facilitate fun nights out in Honolulu through his activities. He often told the story about how he participated in a major drug interdiction with the U.S. Coast Guard, where the ship that the drugs were on caught fire and all the drugs burned, exposing him and his comrades to copious amounts of smoke. And you can finish that story on your own, how that turned out. He was very proud to be on the ceremonial rifle drill guard and would often tell the story about how he stabbed his hand with the bayonet during practice one day, and that injury almost prevented him from performing in a coveted change of command ceremony for the Pacific Fleet. They would not allow him to participate because he had stitches in his hand. So he ripped the stitches out with his teeth so that he could be able to join. The scar between his thumb and index finger bore witness to this account the rest of his life. As I said before, as a 19 and 20-year-old, he lived a slightly exciting life in Honolulu. I won't tell many of those stories, but he enjoyed taking me to Hawaii for my first time there to see some of his old favorite hangouts. We walked into one bar he had frequented quite often while he was in the Navy, and the bartender, who had not seen him in over a decade, just poured him his drink without asking what he wanted because he already knew. I don't think he even realized that Larry had not been there in over 10 years. Beyond the fun memories, he also recounted some somber ones. He would talk about the power of the ship's arsenal and how it rocked the ship when fired. He talked about quiet, intense nights on watch for mines as they floated through the Persian Gulf. When the USS Warden was decommissioned and sunk off the coast of Hawaii in 2000 for target practice, he took that very hard. He never got tattoos while in the Navy, which is slightly odd, but he got one on his 46th birthday, and it was an anchor with the ship's call sign CG-18 engraved on it. So even after 20 years of being discharged, that ship was still on his mind to be permanently inked on him, and that was 13 years after it became the foundation of a thriving reef under the Hawaiian waves. Larry was already out of the closet by the time he graduated high school, so he did worry a bit about having to then hide himself once he went back into service. But to be honest, somehow, he was luckier than many gay men in the military at the time, and this was before Don't Ask, Don't Tell. While he was somewhat discreet, he wasn't exactly fully in the closet either. Early on, he met a fellow recruit in boot camp, and Larry and this person, I had his name in here earlier, but his sister didn't realize their relationship. They thought he was just a friend. So I've deleted the name so as not to out him any further. But Larry and this person would find themselves in various parts of the world at the same time over the years, forming a bit of a relationship. Lucky for me, that relationship didn't stick. When in port, he would sometimes visit the establishments that were off limits because they were known as gay bars. And he figured if they were off limits, it would be where all the fun was, and there he would go. He performed in drag during the shellback ceremony for his ship's equator crossing. He had a rather vulgar drag name and even feigned a vulgar act with the captain that should have been an immediate expulsion from service. You can see a picture of that drag performance in your program. Sometimes people have said it resembles his sister Holly's, sometimes. Just a few months prior to his discharge, Larry made the decision to forthrightly come out to his shipmates. This was risky at the time, but he was met with nothing but acceptance from the crew and the few officers he told. I'm not really sure why he did that when he was about to leave anyway, or why he got such a good reception from it. But he had earned their respect. Larry passed away at home on October 15th, 2024. Like Lola, he was diagnosed with aggressive brain cancer called glioblastoma, less than just 2 months before his death. Thankfully, there was very limited pain for him through most of this journey. There was really no time to process what was happening in real time, and I'm not certain how much Larry was actually able to absorb and process. The brain surgeries and the tumor altered his mental capacity. His short-term memory was very faulty, but his long-term memories from our life and his life before us remained, even if they were a little mixed up sometimes. Spending most of those weeks in the neuro ICU, Larry and I got to know the nurses and staff pretty well. He was our favorite patient, partly because, unfortunately, he was one of the few that were in that ward that were conscious most of the time, but also because of his humor and positive attitude. He was in that neuro ICU and the rehab hospital for a total of 40 nights. They would ask him several times per day where he was as a mental test, and he would sometimes say Hawaii. His other frequent responses tended to be some of our favorite bars around DC. He would tell them some of the stories about his Navy days, some of which I would have to censor, and one of his nurses was also former Navy, and they formed a strong bond, and she especially watched after him. There was one period where he had stopped eating, and so they inserted a feeding tube through his nose to provide nourishment, which he did not like. He ripped it out. So they put his hands in padded boxing gloves so that he would not be able to use his hands to pull out the new tube. They even had a robotic monitor in the room whereby an attendant watched him remotely, who would come on the screen and admonish him if he moved his padded hands too close to his nose. He would implore me and others to undo the Velcro around his wrist, securing the gloves. Of course, I refused, and he would playfully box with me as punishment. Despite all this, he somehow managed to get the gloves off and pull the tube out again. Nurses came in and scolded him about doing that, but also amusedly surprised that he was able to. He looked at me with a smirk and said, "I warned them I was in the Navy. I can do anything." It reminded me of the story of him pulling out the stitches from his bayonet injury. Even at the end, even with a little confusion, he was Navy through and through. We buried him among heroes at Quantico National Cemetery on October 29th. We had a more non-conventional memorial service prior, and then the procession up Route 1 to Quantico for the more formal military funeral. Larry would have appreciated both because he was both unique and also appreciated tradition and ceremony. Our procession was longer than many of our funeral director had been a part of, and I was moved to tears as the police officers of the various jurisdictions we traveled through would stand by their motorcycles and salute as they passed us on to the next jurisdiction. Even some construction workers on the road stopped, removed their hard hats, and put their hands on their hearts as we went by, realizing that there was a veteran being carried in the car. That respect continued as we arrived to find an all-female honor guard receiving us. This included the officer who presented me with the folded flag from his casket. On behalf of the President of the United States, the Navy, and a grateful nation, she has probably said these words hundreds of times, usually to spouses of a different gender than the deceased. But she delivered them with such sincerity and respect, looking me directly in my tearful eyes with a meaningfulness that did not seem to come from her rehearsals. I had no doubt that she meant those words. And it was not lost on me that when Larry joined the Navy, his honor guard would not have looked that way, and those words would not have been said to me in that way, if at all. It is also not lost on me that we live in precarious times when that same dignity may not always be afforded without vigilance from all of us. I am thankful that the letter I was presented was signed by a president whom I know didn't care what Larry's sexual orientation was, only that he had served with honor and is survived by many grieving people. The graves at Quantico are organized by date of death. The headstones in Larry's section are very much dominated by those who served in the Korean and Vietnam Wars. He is one of only 4 or 5 that served in the Persian Gulf. I halfway jokingly say he was buried in the wrong section because at 57, he was way too young. But it causes me to wonder how many of those brothers and sisters buried around him who served earlier than him perhaps did not receive the same equal treatment he did while he was serving. I doubt any of them would care that the fellow hero buried alongside them was gay. Sunday is Larry's birthday, and it'll be a difficult day, but we're going to be celebrating in one of the gayest places on earth in Provincetown, one of our favorite places, with over a dozen family and friends. I will always miss him and always be appreciative to the Navy for helping make him the person I loved, and in the end, honoring him, and in the end, honoring our love. Again, I'm thankful to this organization for ensuring that that same respect and commemoration is extended to everyone. Thank you.
Joining Scooter today is Larry's sister Kelly, sister Holly, and nephew Morgan.